I agreed to house sit for my parents in my childhood home. By Forward Crow 9291. Chapter 1. I may have made a huge mistake. Last Friday I arrived at my childhood home for the first time in 12 years. I'm supposed to stay another week, and I don't know that I am going to survive here that long. I don't have anything against my parents, actually I love them, they're awesome people, but I moved out of state for college and circumstances have just played out that my parents have visited me, or we have met at one of my siblings' houses. I have 3 siblings, one older brother, a younger sister, and my younger brother is the baby of the family. We all have moved around quite a bit, but my youngest 2 siblings have always lived near each other, so their houses have been the obvious meeting places for holidays and gatherings to save on the travel. My parents are retired now and travel a ton, making sure to visit each of us every year, well, aside from the past few years due to COVID. That's sort of how I ended up agreeing to house sit for a week for them. My sister and my elder brother arranged a Disney trip for their kids this week, and my younger brother and his wife decided to tag along. I was actually planning to go too, but my parents needed someone to watch the house if they were going to go. I know you're probably wondering why they wouldn't just hire someone or leave the house, but they have some special needs pets. They have always been the types to adopt senior dogs from the pound of take-in strays, even since childhood. When I was younger, we had a caretaker named Mr. Smiles, who as an adult I learned was really named Mr. Randall Schmidt, that would take care of our house and pets whenever we were traveling as a family, but he passed in the pandemic and my parents, devastated, didn't believe they could find anyone to watch the house. They haven't seen their kids, including me, in almost 3 years. They have a 2-year-old granddaughter they haven't even met in person yet. I had to be the hero and get them on that plane down to Florida. I should have known something was off when my dad outright refused. Just know, you haven't been here in 12 years. You don't know the animals, and they don't know you. Do you want hold on? He broke off, and I heard him talking to my mom, but couldn't hear her side of the conversation. It was muffled, like he was holding the phone to his chest. Yes, I would rather some stranger. He's our son. I know, but he hasn't been here in so long, he won't remember. And Randall knew. Okay, I know. We can try. And I'll call Brian in the morning so he's on the alert. You there, kid? He asked, now talking into the receiver. Yeah, Dad. Your mother and I have decided to give you a chance, but you're going to get into town a few days early so I can show you the ropes, and I am going to have your uncle come stay in the guest house in case you need help. I was starting to feel a bit offended that my goodwill was being weighed so heavily. I guess now I'd be offended if they hadn't tried to ward me off. Careful, Dad, you don't want to inflate my ego too much. Too late for that, he laughed into the phone. Are you sure, son? It isn't easy keeping this place together, and I was really hoping to have our family back together again. I'm sure there will be other chances for that, Dad. We'll see. I'll see you next month then. Love you, kid. And the line clicked off. We'll see? Was he sick? Was Mom? The way he said that made it sound like we would not all be together again. Looking back now, I think he knew I wasn't cut out for this. He knew that, maybe, the family will all be together again at my funeral. We'll see, guys, maybe you can help me out here. This is a lot of exposition, but I think it is necessary to explain how I ended up in my dad's busted-up Silverado down the unfinished road to my childhood home. The place looked like a 19th century farmhouse, but my parents had designed it and had it built themselves just over 30 years ago. My dad had been in the tech industry since the hardware days, had gotten some employee stock at 2 different companies later acquired by IBM, and with those 2 payouts, he had become reasonably rich, low millionaire. Ironically, my mother and he decided to take their tech money and go live on a literal farm with 43 acres of land and the 3/2 house they now call the guest house. They had built the main house a few years later, about 10 acres separated from the guest house with a 1-car wide dirt road between them. My dad still consulted at tech companies for extra money, but his day-to-day job had become taking care of the animals while my mom preferred gardening, though they did both together and with us frequently. I have to say, seeing my parents felt good, and took away a lot of the nerves that weird call with my dad had left marinating for the past month. We ate breakfast together at the house, caught up on the past few years, discussed the 15 pounds I've gained since last time I saw them, and then my dad brought me upstairs to my bedroom, my childhood bedroom that looked almost untouched since I had left, so I could unpack. Being back in that room, this room where I am now, was jarring, to say the least. No sooner had I walked in than the hair on my neck shot out in alarm. My spine tried to slither down my leg and ice cubes of sweat broke out on my face. My chest collapsed on itself and my vision lost a race with its point of focus. My father must have noticed this happening, as he looked at me from the intersection of concern and sadness. Being here didn't bring back all my memories, just the dread. I had flashes of the memories though. A rattling of my closet door so fierce, I had pushed all the furniture in the room against it just to see them shake just as fiercely. A small light under my bed seen from the wall mirror that had duplicated itself into a laughing pair of eyes. A small statue of a naked man with a smile like the Cheshire Cat, if you caught him in the light while he was looking at you. None of it made sense, but all of it made terror. I was about to scream when my dad started counting to 10, and around 7, I couldn't remember the panic of a few moments earlier. The room was just a room, and the nightmares were those of an imaginative youth. I had also forgotten my dad had that power. It felt like he could count to 10, and Satan himself would have repented and returned to heaven, fork-tailed between his legs. He had used that on me and my siblings like a magic trick all through our childhood, and I guess the old Pavlovian spell was still ingrained in me. You were always the most sensitive of the bunch as a kid, bud. You're a man now, he said, somehow reading my mind. You can use that old trick yourself, works on me too, but these days I have to get into the 40s. I smiled and set my stuff down. I'm more of a live out of a suitcase type than one to use the drawers and closets for a week. My training was a bit anticlimactic. 2 of their dogs have diabetes and need regular shots. All of them have special diets. The food is labeled with their names, they don't steal. The cats know how to feed themselves. Squirt some eye drops on Winky's bad eye, the one without the eyelid, every few hours. Most dogs, comically, had a pill case with the days of the week that older folks used to keep track of their pills. There were 7 dogs in all, for cats, a chicken coop that Uncle Brian would tend near the guest house, an aquarium, and a pair of frogs. The house rules got a bit weird. Look, I don't have the time to teach you everything, so stick to the basics. Take care of the animals, everything is written down and you can always call us to check if you need. Vet number is on the fridge, but none of them are on the verge of croaking except the frogs. My dad chuckled at his own joke. As for the house, stay away from the basement, no matter what you hear. Use your cell before you use the landline if possible. Brian knows you're out here, and if you can't reach him by phone, use the signal in our bedroom for an emergency. Lock the doors and put the alarm on whenever you leave or go to sleep. Do not go outside at night. Actually, please just try to stay in your room from sundown to sunup. There's a mini fridge in there now and the TV and everything is hooked up. Even got your old Spock's wired up in there. I opened my mouth to ask about the intense rules and he said, I just said I don't have time to teach you everything. It's all up there already, or most of it, you'll know what to do if you need it. Oh, And in case you need reminding, stay out of my office and don't touch any of the books on the parents-only bookshelf. Rules from when we were kids. I was starting to feel pretty patronized, but the guy was my dad after all, and when he got like this we knew it best not to argue. I chalked it up to him trying to give me a hard time about not being home in a while. Until my parents left Sunday night, nothing extraordinary happened. Actually, I did notice that a branch must be hitting the house in the wind somewhere, and had a hard time sleeping. In my sleepy brain, it sounded like a steady tap 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 on a door. Yesterday was pretty normal too. I took care of the animals according to their schedule. It took me most of the day, but pretty much without event. I did end up going out to one of the old barns around dusk while looking for one of the cats, Periwinkle, I hadn't seen since noon. I heard a crash and yowling from inside the barn, but as I was about to open the door, Periwinkle meowed from right next to my foot and almost made me pee myself. I'm not sure how I didn't see him walking up to the barn, and I almost went to investigate the sound, but Periwinkle dashed off towards the house and, remembering my dad's advice about nighttime and the outdoors, followed him back. Halfway back I stopped when I heard something like a crunching step on dry leaves, weird for summer, and then as I started walking again, I heard what sounded like echoes of my squishy steps in the wet grass. I started walking faster and the echoes sped up too. I was almost at the house when I noticed the echoes were now faster than, and slightly preceding my own steps. I wasn't messing around, so I ran through the gate to the yard, slamming it behind me, jumped up the porch steps, threw the door open and locked it behind me. I noticed Periwinkle on one of the windowsills and looked out to see he was looking at an open gate. I grabbed the little guy and went upstairs to my room, locking the room door for good measure. I was collecting a little zoo in my room at this point, as I had taken to sleeping with some of the friendlier dogs before my parents even left. The diabetic dogs also stayed with me because I had to feed them at 5 a.m., and I was having a hard enough time waking up that early without having to track them down in a 7-bed 5-bath, 4,000 square feet house. Maybe the open gate had me spooked this morning and it altered my perspective today. Maybe my uncle is trying to mess with me. We've never been on the best terms, but today was kind of messed up. I woke up and ate breakfast, noticing the gate was closed. Rather than make me feel any better, this made me suspicious. I decided I would go visit my uncle and casually bring it up. My dad had given me a hard enough time about watching the house. I wasn't going to call him about it and prove his doubts were credible, even if they were. I completed my morning feeding and medicating of the animals and took off for the guest house on foot. I got there around noon and the summer heat had me sweating. There was no car in the drive, but I tried knocking anyway. No answer. I walked over to the chicken coop and saw they had been cared for this morning. Okay, he probably ran into town after feeding them. I didn't want to come back later, so slipped around the side door, found a spare key under a loose side panel on the house, and let myself in. My older brother was sitting in the kitchen and stood abruptly, alarmed. "What the hell, Phil, you can't just come in here like that," my brother said. "Me? What are you even doing here? You're supposed to be at Disney with the family." "Oh, I had to stay an extra couple days for a work thing. I'm flying out tonight," he replied. That seemed to make sense. He had been staying in the guest house with his family since shortly after COVID to help my parents with groceries and things like that. I had thought the whole family had taken off before I even arrived. It was weird I hadn't seen him. But wait, I thought your job was fully remote now. He muttered something I didn't catch, but seemed frustrated. "Yeah, I had an interview though for a new position. We want to stay near mother and father, and my job may change its remote requirements soon." I guessed he hadn't wanted to talk about his interview in case it didn't pan out. Maybe that was why he was avoiding me. His use of mother and father came out weirdly robotic, but sometimes Jerry was weird like that. I brushed it off. "Where's Uncle Brian?" I asked. "Probably off drunk somewhere. I had to feed the chickens this morning for him." "Huh, well that explained the chickens and lack of a car too, I guess." Jerry was probably an even better person to question. I wanted to ask him why Dad told me to stay inside after dark. Last night I heard something and I don't know, are there bears or something? "The bears are afraid to come here," he said, monotone. "What?" "Oh," he snapped as if coming out of a daydream, "you know, Father has little patience for bears and scares them off. You should not go out at night." "Why?" "Why what?" "Why shouldn't I go outside at night? There could be bears." "You just said Father is not here." I was getting kind of creeped out. Jerry was weird, but this was like bad acid trip weird. I would just ask Brian if I saw him around. We had settled into sitting at the kitchen table after the initial confrontation, and I rose to excuse myself. Jerry clamped his hand on mine, unnaturally cold to the touch. I let out a half shout in surprise at the speed of his movement. He looked at me dead in the eyes, and I saw now that they were a little too dilated for the fluorescent light in the room. "You could always check Father's office if you think he is hiding something." Okay, Jerry was on drugs or something. I pried his cold fingers off my hand and said, "That's not a bad idea. I should get back to the animals now." He just smiled at me and then returned to the position he had been when I walked in. Just sitting at the kitchen table staring at the wall. Weird. I left quickly. I did my rounds with the dogs and sat down to watch Netflix for a bit. I dozed off, and when I woke up it was dark. I had locked up earlier, but when I went to turn on the alarm I heard, "Warning, office window open." Nope. I hadn't set foot in that office, but I'm sure my dad would have left it locked. I went to check and felt very wrong walking into his office. Normal office, but had 2 walls with windows and a steel door. This room was not on the corner of the house, so the 2 windows threw me. I clicked on the lights and checked the window. That made sense, exterior, first. I opened the closed blinds and saw the window was locked, but the alarm sensor had fallen off. Phew, no break-in. I stuck the sensor back on and looked at my reflection in the illuminated light of the window. I freaked out seeing a shadow past the door frame behind me. Just a dog or something, I told myself. I turned around and clicked the lights off, deliberately avoiding that steel door and window. I went to close the door and heard a tap 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 on the steel door behind me. Curiosity got the better of me and I turned. What caught my attention wasn't the door. I had left the curtains open on the window, and with the light off and my reflection no longer visible, my face was still peeking in the window from outside, smiling a wide grin. I opened my mouth to scream and the reflection did too. Then he slammed his hands on the window and I slammed the door behind me. I heard him pounding. My chest seized up. I heard glass break and a scream of giddy laughter. I started to cry a bit. I heard my dad's voice. "You can use that old trick yourself." I started to count out loud with my eyes glued shut. 1. Another break as the glass was shattered completely. 2. The sound of crunching glass as something dragged itself through the window. 3. The alarm screaming as that thing harmonized a giddy squeal with it. 4. A thud on the ground as it flopped from the window. 5. Crunching as it squirmed across the floor, not walking but squirming. 6. Its breathing under the crack of the door. 7. A disgusting squelching and the sound of cracking bones as that creature, that thing, straightened up on the other side of the door. 8. The quiet click of the latch as the doorknob turned. 9. The apotheosis of a door creak, a creak that hadn't been there when the door had opened for me a minute earlier, a creak that mocked me with the dread it shoved into my soul. 10. I whirled around a face. the open door of my dad's otherwise normal office. One window, and not the one I had just been looking out. I felt the relief I had felt in my room with my dad counting, but underscored by that dread still there. I heard my dad again say, "These days I have to get into the 40s. I called my sister, on my cell, when I got to my room to ask how things were going at Disney. She said they were great and she had really missed Mom and Dad and Jerry. Jerry, is there? I managed to get out only slightly choked. Been here since last week. You okay, Phil? Yeah, sorry I lied, scratching a weird rash on my hand. Am I going crazy, Reddit? I've been sitting here typing this with Periwinkle for the past few hours. How am I going to last another week if this is day 2? Please, any advice or experience with these things is helpful.